Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is absolutely crucial in the world of education. We're talking about that massive, profound shift a school head has to make. Moving away from being a day-to-day firefighter who's constantly just putting out those inevitable daily blazes, and stepping up to become a true strategic organizational leader. So, let's jump right in and see how this evolution actually happens. If you really think about it, a school principal is a lot like a master chef. Just imagine a prep table completely covered in chaotic raw ingredients. You've got mungo, olive oil, saffron, maybe some bell peppers, and chicken liver, all just thrown together. Well, in a school, those raw materials are your staff, your students, your budgets, and all those intense community expectations. You're getting hit with these chaotic inputs every single day. But here's the thing, just like that chef, your job isn't to just stare at the mess. It's to masterfully combine all of it to create a cohesive, beautiful masterpiece of a school. So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the school head chef. Second, envisioning the ideal school. Third, defining the organization. Fourth, we'll unpack the McKinsey 7S model. And finally, diagnosing your environment using SWOT and PESTLE. All right, part one, the school head chef, managing the chaos. Listen, you just cannot wing this stuff. A great chef doesn't just toss random things into a pot and cross their fingers, right? They use proven recipes, precise techniques, and perfect timing. It takes a truly visionary organizational leader to transform all those chaotic inputs into a successful school. And to do that, you need actual organizational design tools to build a system that works on its own. It's all about moving from just reacting to things to intentionally designing your environment. Think about the difference between frantically rearranging the schedule because a teacher called in sick at 7 a.m. versus having a resilient master schedule that just automatically absorbs those daily hiccups. That second option, that's true organizational leadership. Which brings us to part two, envisioning the ideal school. Where exactly are we going? Think about where you are right now versus where you want to be. Maybe your current reality is a humble building doing its absolute best, but it's a bit cramped, visually uninspiring, or just outdated. But then you've got the dream, that modern, flowing, multi-level facility perfectly designed for 21st century learning. That stark gap between today's reality and tomorrow's ideal, that is exactly what your 3 to 5 year strategic plan is built to cross. As a leader, you literally have to see that future building in your mind's eye long before the foundation is ever poured. Actually, let's just pause for a second. I want to ask you directly, if resources were absolutely no issue, what would your ideal school look like in the next 6 years? Seriously, think about it. And don't just think about fresh paint or brand new sports equipment. What specific services are you providing? What do your core values actually look like in practice when a student walks through those front doors? How are your teachers collaborating? Let yourself fully envision that ideal state, because that grand vision is going to become the anchor for every single organizational decision you make from here on out. Moving right along to part three, defining the organization. This is our vehicle for transformation. I really love how management theorist Chester Barnard defines this. He calls an organization a system of consciously coordinated activities. He says a leader's real role is to create an atmosphere where there's total coherence between values and purpose. The magic phrase there is consciously coordinated. An organization is not just a bunch of people who happen to be drinking coffee in the same building. As the leader, it is your job to deliberately coordinate their activities, making sure everyone, from the custodial staff to the senior teachers, is perfectly aligned with the ultimate purpose of the school. But we do have to acknowledge the unique playing field we're on here. Leading a public organization, like a school, is fundamentally different from running a typical private business. You aren't just chasing profit margins in a free, competitive market. Instead, you're balancing incredibly varied societal interests. You answer to local communities, you adapt to policies from elected leaders, and you have to somehow please a multitude of different stakeholders while still delivering a top-tier education. It's a really complex balancing act, for sure. So how do you manage all that complexity? Well, you lean on some snappy, non-negotiable organization design principles. First off, your structure absolutely has to support your vision. If your vision is all about collaborative learning, you cannot have a rigidly siloed structure. You've got to clarify workflows. You need to create doable roles, because if a job secretly takes 3 people to finish, that's just a fast track to burnout. You need to empower your staff, define shared accountabilities so everyone knows what happens when there's a disagreement, and hold entire teams accountable, not just individuals. These principles are literally the gears making your 3 to 5 year vision a reality. Okay, part 4, the McKinsey 7S model. Let's align those internal parts. This framework was designed by Tom Peters and Robert Waterman, and it is all about beautiful interdependence. You've got strategy, structure, systems, skills, style, and staff, and they all connect to one another. But the really cool part is what sits right in the dead center: shared values. Every single piece of your school is connected by those core values. You honestly can't change one node on this web without vibrating all the others. It's a great reminder that a school is a living and breathing ecosystem. To make this a bit easier to digest, the model splits these 7 elements into 2 buckets. First, we have the hard elements: strategy, structure, and systems. These are fairly easy to pinpoint. You can literally point to a printed org chart, a procedural manual, or a budget. But then we have the soft elements: shared values, skills, style, and staff. These are much harder to describe because they're less tangible. They're the human elements. It's the culture, the unwritten rules, the collective vibe of your teachers. But make no mistake, they are equally, if not more, crucial to your school's success. The big takeaway here: total organizational alignment. These elements are completely interdependent and have to fit together seamlessly. Let's say you roll out a massive, ambitious new strategy, like fully integrating STEM into every single classroom. But your staff doesn't actually have the skills to teach it, and your leadership style remains rigidly top-down. Guess what? That strategy is going to fail, guaranteed. When one S moves, you, as the organizational leader, have to consciously shift the other 6 to keep everything in perfect harmony. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Diagnosing with SWOT and PESTLE. Time to analyze our environment. You're probably familiar with the classic SWOT matrix, but let's look at it through the lens of a school head. It's powerful because it's so simple. Strengths and weaknesses are entirely internal. These are factors inside your school walls, like a highly dedicated faculty or maybe a poorly designed library, things you have direct control over. Opportunities and threats, on the other hand, are entirely external. These are the macro winds blowing outside your school that you absolutely cannot control, but you definitely have to navigate. But hey, a diagnosis is pretty useless without a prescription, right? Here's how you turn that SWOT analysis into actual, concrete school improvement programs in 4 steps. First, you relentlessly focus on leveraging your strengths to gain momentum. Second, you strategically work to improve those internal weaknesses so they don't drag you down. Third, you build proactive defenses to minimize external threats. And fourth, you actively position your school to jump on those external opportunities, like cool community partnerships or new grant funding. And speaking of the outside world, that leads us perfectly into PESTLE. It's an acronym that forces you to scan the far horizon: political, economic, sociocultural, technological, legal, and environmental factors. These are the massive external forces dictating your long-term strategy. A change in government policy, an economic downturn, the rapid rise of AI, these aren't just news headlines. They will directly impact your vision. Just think about generative AI. It forces you to immediately reevaluate the skills element of your 7S model. Do your teachers know how to use it? As the head chef, you really have to know what the weather is doing outside your kitchen to prepare the right menu inside. Wow, we have covered a ton of ground today, from managing daily chaos to aligning internal systems and scanning global horizons. But I want to leave you with a final, deeply personal thought. Ask yourself, what are you appreciating about yourself right now? Moving from a daily firefighter to a visionary organizational leader is a really steep and honestly exhausting learning curve. So take a moment to truly recognize your own growth, your resilience, and your dedication. Are you ready to embrace these tools and build the school your students truly deserve? I know you are. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep building those masterpieces.